question and you want an answer, how fast? Right? The value proposition, I want all this information at my fingertips. What the encyclopedias gave us for 100 years, it's as powerful as it ever was. But what happened to the encyclopedias was they lost track of the value proposition in the process of defending their value delivery system, which was bookbinding. They balled up their value proposition into one delivery system, books. When an alternative delivery system comes along, whether it be DVD, whether it be CD, or whether it be streaming, or whether it be internet, all these other technologies, they did not move on those technologies. Rather, what they tried to do was keep bookbinding cheaper and cheaper and cheaper and cheaper. So if you were approached by the Encyclopedia Britannica to fund the money for a new printing plant, you see the trap you're getting caught in? Sounds good. We've got printers, we've got people trained to print, we've got people that want to print, we know how to print, maybe we should put up a new printing plant for Encyclopedia Britannica. But what are you doing? You're subsidizing their attempt to protect and defend their business, which is what the second alternative would have been to Sears, which is they would have failed much earlier. Had Hoffman Estates in the state of Illinois not subsidized the shareholders of Sears, which is where the money went to the chairman of the company and the private equity firm that had set it up, then the company would have been forced to face bankruptcy much earlier. Would that be bad? I don't know. It's hard for me to say that Sears going bankrupt in 2017 is a lot worse than going bankrupt in 2012 or 2013. Not when the handwriting's on the wall, and not when the money could have been invested in a better way, right? Your job is to invest in value propositions. With the mistakes that happen in Illinois, and there are many, I lived there for 27 years, the one thing they did good was they did put an incubator into the merchandise mart in downtown Chicago. And it didn't look like it was doing much for a long time, but it did start to attract some tech businesses. And today, Google has a very, very large group of people working in the merchandise mart in Chicago. It's been successful for them. That's worked out well. By seed funding that incubator, they brought in more tech jobs. Now, the nice thing is the reason you want to do that is because Google's got an ecosystem of businesses. They're not just search, right? They're out there with not only Google search and ad sales, but they've also got a lot of artificial intelligence that's starting to find its way embedded into everything else, like the Google Home Assistant that's in the Google speaker, right? That understands what you're saying, understands the questions, knows how to give answers. This sort of Google Home Assistant and artificial intelligence feeds into what? The Google car, right? Which will feed into what? Some kind of future version, perhaps, of a device that used to be called Google Glass. All of these are things that are headed towards a future world, right? It is growing the value proposition of helping people have the information they want at their fingertips and freeing them to do other things besides hunt things up, even if that means just hunting up how to drive a car, right? It is pushing forward the value proposition, and that's where you want to invest. You want to invest in the growth of value propositions because that's how you attract talent. People want to work for the companies that are going to be the part of the future. It's not a matter of just high-paying jobs. It's, I want to be part of the future. Honestly, I can remember 30 years ago when I enjoyed going to San Francisco. I can't say that anymore now. It costs so much to live there. The traffic's so bad. It's so difficult that I don't find it a pleasant place to be anymore. But that's me. Thousands of people are going there now, all the time. Why? They're attracted there because not that it has jobs, but the kind of jobs it has. The future is seen as being there, right? And that's what's important. Do people see the future in what it is that you're trying to build? So successful development isn't about understanding your core and having a focus on that core and knowing all the great things. I remember when Minnesota used to say we're the land of 10,000 lakes. If I had time to fish all of them, I'd find that very important, you know. But if I'm trying to grow a business, I'm not sure that that's terribly important to what I would like to know about some kind of a state. Rather, you must overcome that. And I'm being completely serious here. You must overcome that addiction to your past legacy if you want to be successful. Because that past legacy will hold you back from doing the things you need to do. It will hold you back from doing the things you need to do to be able to attract the kinds of businesses that will help you to grow. My good friend Buckley told me today that Wisconsin's about in the middle of the pack when it comes to a lot of this job stuff. He said, you're the 5th best state in the country at keeping people after you've trained them. 5th best. That's a lot. That's a high position. He also told me you're dead last at getting people to come here after they're trained. That's a problem that needs to be worked on. How do you do that? I used to have a cabin in the Schwamagon up northwest of Wausau. It was absolutely beautiful, but I didn't go there to work. I went there on holiday. As much as all my neighbors enjoyed hunting deer and bear and fishing the beautiful fish of those lakes, it wasn't attracting jobs. It's beautiful. There's no doubt Wisconsin's a beautiful state. There's no doubt that the state's had a lot of great heritage. The question, though, isn't about that. The question is, what does Wisconsin want to be in the year 2025 and the year 2030? That's what you have to place your bets on. That's where you need to go. It's absolutely certain that every business gets disrupted, right? We all needed maps till somebody gave us navigation. I didn't need maps anymore. We all needed a watch until we had cell phones. Then I don't necessarily need a watch anymore, right? Disruptions, these disruptions that I described to you earlier up here with the rope, they are happening in industries all around us. So the best way to predict your future is to create it. And I'm glad to say Abraham Lincoln said that, not me. All right? You're not going to create your future by randomly listening to companies walk into your state and ask for opportunities to do development or put up plants and see what kinds of things you can do. You're going to need a plan. You need a strategy. Where do you want to be? What do you want Wisconsin to look like? What do you want the employment to look like? Don't say, if I go train a bunch of high schoolers to do certain kinds of things, I will get that economy. Instead, you have to say, how do I get the business here that will attract the people that want to be in those kinds of businesses? That's what's important to you. If the jobs are there that are the kind of jobs people want, they will flock to you. You will not have to go out and seek them, and you will not necessarily even have to spend on their education. The University of Illinois in Champaign has been producing some of the best engineers in this country for 25 years. Do you know who the #1 recruiter is of those? Google. Number 2, Facebook. Number 3, Apple. The state of Illinois is educating all these people who are leaving, right? That's not good for the state of Illinois. Think about it that way. Where do you want, what kinds of jobs do you want to get the people to stay? Not only stay, because you've got that, but get more people to come, to want to be here, to want to do the things, live their lives the way that they want to live their lives. And people's lives revolve around work. I'd love to say recreation, but in a 24/7 world where we all have Apple Watches and smartphones, no, our lives revolve around work. So how do you do this? Well, you got to be future-oriented. You got to obsess about fringe ideas. You have to encourage disruption, and you have to force white space. White space means you got to invest in little projects that start to attract the right kinds of people, right? So these are your 4 steps. The first one is, what % of your time do you spend trying to figure out market trends and where you want to place your investments? Or do you spend most of your time reacting to companies out there that are sending you notifications of an interest to try to expand their business? If you're being reactive and not proactive, you don't have a strategy. Because that's what you really need. I think it's wonderful that you've got a nice distribution center for Amazon in this state. It's very nice. Great win for you guys. It's wonderful that Uline's across the street making all those cardboard boxes for Amazon to use across the street. The Foxconn deal, you got to be happy about that, right? You absolutely got to be happy about that. But now is not the time to rest on your laurels. Now is the time to say, how do I build for the future? How do I go get the right kinds of companies that are going to make 2017, when you won a lot, 16 and 17, and now 18, look like barely a start? That's what you need to say. This is a start towards a much greater future. So, don't think about how to protect a business. Think about where you want to be. And as that, I want to bring up Seattle. Now, most of you, when I say Seattle, probably have a pretty positive attitude. But I really want you to think about this. Town is captured between the ocean and a mountain. If you think northern Wisconsin weather is bad, try spending a spring and a winter in Seattle when it's constantly wet. I went there to golf one time. They actually wear galoshes with cleats on them. They told me, Adam, if you don't want to golf in the rain, you don't get to live in Seattle, right? It was that simple. Not only that, they have earthquakes, big earthquakes. And then people have to live on islands, so commuting means taking these ferries, which can sometimes take 45 minutes just to get from A to B, and then you may have to take a bicycle and another stretch of the leg. I can sit here and give you hand and verse all the problems of being Seattle. And for a long time, that was the way they thought of themselves. The port of Seattle was very important. Why? Because it moved timber out of the state, right? It was a nice port for taking all those trees and all the pulp, getting it out of the state, and bringing in all those shipments from Asia. So the port of Seattle had its own branding. Very important in the industrial era, right? And they had been successful in building themselves as a center of aerodynamics with Boeing Corporation. But they started to think about this. And is that really the future of where we want to be? And as the tech industry exploded in California, and people complained. I mean, people still complain about the high cost of having a tech business in Northern California. It's hard to hire people. People have to be paid huge amounts of money because it's expensive to live there. It's very hard to keep people in that part of the world. These were all the complaints. These go back to the 1970s. And they started to target that industry. And what did they get? Microsoft. And now you start to see what you've done in terms of changing the dynamics of thinking about the future of your city. Microsoft begets this wonderful PC boom, which then starts the wave that becomes the internet, and you get this guy who says, if I'm going to start up an e-commerce business that's going to be focused on technology, I want to go to a technology center, and he picks Seattle, right? They didn't go out and make that happen by talking about building airplanes. Those left things, those were industrial era wins. Now, Boeing is headquartered in Chicago, and they build more planes in Charleston, South Carolina than they do in Seattle and Tacoma. Is Seattle a loser? No, you can't say that, and I know you won't say that. They're a winner by a huge stretch. But this is the point of planning. This is the point of saying I'm going to promote a value proposition, I'm going to go with trends, I'm going to move to where the future is going to be. And the future was all around technology, and that's where they placed their bets. You've got to think about this in terms of being very careful not to protect. I've heard so many people talk about their towns and trying to protect their local newspapers. Truth. In 2000, 60%